Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Today, we are going to talk about FinOps and shifting left for cloud cost, predictability, and optimization. This session was long pending from March, but now I am going to do this session with you all. Hopefully, you enjoyed this session and also be curious about FinOps and the next steps in your journey with cloud. Before we start this session, I introduce myself. I'm Garima Bajpai, founder for the Canada DevOps Community of Practice, which has several chapters, Ottawa, Toronto, Edmonton, Atlantic provinces, Montreal. If you would like to kind of get ahead in your journey with DevOps and like-minded people, I would highly appreciate if you can check out these chapters and connect with the community members and the chapter lead if you're willing to make any contributions to the community. I also am taking references for this a session from a book, AWS FinOps Simplified. This is a book published by Pact. And if you happen to be in one of our like face-to-face event, you will get the chance to win this book. So stay tuned for that. Why I think I'm qualified to talk about this topic because I've been active in the DevOps community from several years. I'm also the chair for the ambassador group at the Continuous Delivery Foundation. And we also kind of look at some progressive aspects of continuous delivery and how it ties back to like FinOps and cost and predictability and optimization of, cloud workloads when it comes from a continuous delivery perspective. I was also nominated as the DevOps Dozen 2022 by DevOps community, which is like Tech Strong. And I think that is something which is also kind of one of the key kind of, motivators to me to work for me to work in this community and kind of, bring new topics to you guys. So today we are going to talk about FinOps. So let's start with the basics, what FinOps is and where this term originated from. So I kind of did a lot of fact finding. I found that FinOps Foundation has come up with strong recommendation about how to define FinOps, and they build a very very strategic connection in terms of finance and DevOps together. So FinOps is an evolving cloud financial management discipline and cultural practice that enables organizations to get maximum business value by helping engineering, finance, technology, and business teams to collaborate on a data-driven spending decisions. And you will come to know during this session that I only will not talk about spending, but I will talk about other different things. FinOps is more than cost optimization and cost control. And let's dig deeper into this conversation as we go along. This definition was taken through the FinOps Foundation. It is publicly available. And if you would like to kind of also join this community, I think you can check out the links. So let's also begin with what Gartner is saying. And I now and then come up with some recommendations from Gartner in my like talks and my presentations. So I was curious that what Gartner is saying about FinOps. So Gartner forecasted that the worldwide end user spending on public cloud services will expand by 20.4% in 2022 to nearly 500 billion and reaching 600 billion USD in 2023, with more than 40% of enterprise workloads deployed on the cloud. So the opportunity and the potential is really huge. If you check out all these reports, it will also give you the trend of, how traditional infrastructure is moving from the traditional workloads and traditional capability and capacity to cloud. And it is predicted that the cloud will overtake the traditional infrastructure space in the upcoming 2-3 years. So What eventually has started to happen is that enterprises are also becoming conscious about their cloud choice, and they're tracking their cloud costs as well. And in some reports, I actually saw that the cloud cost, and it is directly correlated to the waste which we have generated through over provisioning, or use resources which we are not using in cloud ecosystem, is growing as we speak, and it is as big as 30% in some reports. So it makes us think about why we should consider FinOps as one of the critical aspects when it comes to cost. But also, reflecting one other fact, that the hyper cycle for emerging tech in 2022, Gartner's report has actually augmented FinOps, which automates traditional DevOps concepts of agility, continuous integration, deployment, and end user feedback to financial government, budgeting, cost optimization efforts through application of AI and machine learning processes. So this is another area which is growing, and probably this is also kind of filling the innovation gap, which has been there for a long time from a financial governance perspective. Um, so we'll talk more about it in the upcoming slides, but let's begin this with some more perspective. Like, when we talk about FinOps, and how do we reach at this stage? How did we generate this kind of waste in cloud when we are kind of scaling our workloads on cloud? So there are multiple factors to it. Of course, easy provisioning, um, also kind of having not having direct connection with developers, how they're using those resources, how they're provisioning these resources, to how the cost of this resources are kind of tied back to an organization, also contributes to this kind of challenge. But there are more challenges to it. There is exponential growth in tools, and of course this has contributed to kind of look into different types of tools, different types of capabilities and applications. And sometimes you can do the job with one tool, but you have several of these tools and they're under provisioned or underutilized. That has contributed to this mix. Complexity is another factor. If you look at when people started their journey of onboarding to cloud, they were concentrating on one single cloud, and now there are multiple clouds, multi-cloud environment, hybrid cloud environment. On-premise is also kind of very popular. People are bringing back their kind of, stacks in on-premise just to kind of control the cost. So complexity is also increasing, and rapid adoption has also brought in new risks, operational overheads, and that also has contributed to a certain extent of in growing the cost on cloud, because there is over provisioning, underutilization, and there is not a cost conscious approach when it comes to these kind of transformations. Cost itself is one of the drivers to look into FinOps, because more and more services and applications are moving to cloud. So financial practices and engineering practices are getting tightly integrated. So there is a kind of a desired need to kind of see how we can innovate, financial governance alongside our cloud native, application workloads. And lastly, I would say skill shortage has contributed to this mix as well. When you think about architectural aspects of, moving to cloud, we could have done better with a better understanding of, architectural landscapes, how to optimize architecture, how do you optimize compute, storage, networking, other kind of sharing portfolio across the business lines. But I think from a perspective of skills, we have been lacking that kind of an architectural view on things, and that has also contributed into, us not taking cost as one of the key parameters or key KPI or key metrics to talk about. Even if you talk about DORA metrics, it does not talk about FinOps, right? So let's kind of think about other aspects as well. So other things which I would also like to reflect is cloud as a technology. You have to shift your mindset. So cloud is consumed, not owned. So that is the first and foremost thing which has contributed to growing cost on cloud, because the mindset has not changed. The problem that the businesses have hard time tying back spending to specific departments, groups, projects, because there is a lack of overall governance structure. And I'll talk more about it, like how our financial governance is concentrated on capex centricity, and that has also kind of contributed to, this problem. When we try to reduce cost, it is not only cost, but we reduce innovation as well. So again, we cannot just think about reducing cost for cloud, and that is the crux of how we think about FinOps. And FinOps would be more than cost optimization, and that's what you will realize after this talk, that there is much more meat to this conversation. You can actually bring a lot of cost efficiency, and the trade-off is that you're declining competitiveness. Lastly, I would mention purchasing, vendor management, forecasting, budgeting. These fields have not transformed to an OPEX-centric operational model. So you still see like a CapEx-centric forecasting process. There are cycles of forecasting and budgeting, and then the purchase and vendor management does not work well with OPEX centricity in medium and large enterprises to talk about. So I mean, from a cloud perspective, all these things are radically different. It requires different skill set, and the chief innovation officer or the CFOs have not used these kind of skills extensively before. And these are the words of J.R. Storment from FinOps Foundation. So I kind of do agree with that, statement. Now, we have talked a lot about the problem statement and why FinOps kind of, makes sense. Now we talk about a little bit more about the FinOps framework. So how do we kind of implement FinOps in our organizations and our business units? Definitely there are recommendations from organizations like FinOps Foundation, where they have like put together principles, persona types, maturity levels, phases, domains, and capability. So reiterating back to the definition of FinOps, it's an evolving cloud financial management discipline. And it's a cultural practice that enables organizations to get maximum business value by helping engineering, finance, business teams to collaborate on data-driven spending. Now, who are the people who will drive this conversation? So you will need FinOps practitioners, engineering and operational heads, business and product owners like product management group, as well as finance, procurement, and lastly, executives, to look at the framework and define what kind of OKRs that can be embedded in from a top organization perspective to ensure we have aligned goals and objectives. Now, from a principles perspective, what FinOps Foundation is advocating is it's a team sport. So teams need to collaborate. Everyone takes ownership of their cloud usage. And this is something which we can also elaborate and discuss, that whether maybe there is one way or there is like several kind of ways to kind of reach that point. We could discuss that. But moving forward, they also advocate a centralized team which enables FinOps reports, essentially their accessibility, transparency, the timeliness of those reports. And what it does is it enables business to take decisions which can bring value from the cloud. and take advantage of the variable cost model which cloud provides. And we can discuss that as well in the upcoming slides. It has phases: inform, optimize, and operate. Inform phase is visibility and getting that allocation tracking. If you've used cloud service providers to a certain extent, you can tag your resources, you can kind of build some intelligence on top of it. There are services available for that. Optimizing is how the usage is connected to the rates and pricing, and how much, and how much impact it comes with a certain amount of cost, right? And then operate means to continuously improve and bring operations in the loop so that we do the right thing from continuously and continually. So yeah, I mean, there are certain phases of it, and there are domains and capabilities which are at the bottom of this slide. So now, I mean, this is one of the frameworks. Now, I mean, this looks very complicated. I mean, this is like a kind of a big bang approach to FinOps. So what are the steps you kind of take in the journey? I'll talk about the first few steps, but before we do that, we have to kind of understand from an implementation point of view, what are the things which we can influence based on our understanding so far. So I've talked about shifting from capex oriented operating model to an opex centric operating model. So IT includes like revisiting budget cycles, cost ownership, spend control, predictability, and resource investments. So keeping that bird's eye view in mind, now how your teams and your support structure can influence those choices is obviously bringing architectural control to allow us to start differentiating our development workloads with our run workloads, for example. Taking delivery teams and making them accountable for just not delivering the right services and features, but also managing fixed and variable cost. And lastly, defining pricing models or contractual pricing optimizations, like committed to use discounts or rate reservations or spot instances. How can we better have a strategy for reserve instances, for example, and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of foundational capabilities which you like to bring in into the organization before even starting to kind of think about implementation stages, right? When you're starting to build a strategy for FinOps and implementing it, don't look at it from the lens of cost optimization. It is more than enabling a better financial posture for your organization. I advocate this because and this is a snippet I have taken from McKinsey, and I have particularly highlighted the middle section, which is accelerated product development and hyperscalability has a huge market potential of $2.3 trillion. So how do we influence that? We could influence that by reducing time to market and rapid prototyping. So how do you bring cloud to the center point of innovation and reduce, let's say, resiliency gaps, create improved margins because the cost of failure is not too large. Selective investment strategy for cloud, like don't kind of just scale an adoption of cloud. Go with hyper performing workloads or use cases which can give you the leverage and the competitive advantage of rapid prototyping, and from, let's say, broad-based migrations to use cases. And this is something which is also advocated in that report from McKinsey. So if you are curious, I have the link at the bottom of the slide. So to iterate, the crux of the slide is just when you are going into an implementation strategy, just think about it's not only about financial posture management. It is how you fill the innovation gap. Now, I promised you that I will talk about taking the first steps. I mean, we have talked about the bigger picture. We have talked about, like, how we see the definition transforming from cost optimization to innovation, innovation landscape. So what can be your first steps? You can start looking at like small micro steps in this, like optimizing compute. If you're using, like, say, AWS, and I come up with these AWS examples all the time because I'm an AWS community builder as well. So using the right sizing recommendations, like AWS compute optimizer is one. I've talked about reserving instances or spot instances, and what is your strategy towards those, and how can you optimize the cost? I mean, this is no one size fit all. So you'll have to do some kind of a due diligence on optimizing your compute workloads. Optimizing storage for is another area which you can look at, and assessing optimization of databases, types of storage like object, file, and block, establishing that hygiene in when you are kind of moving data onto the cloud, like lifecycle policies, using AWS storage lens to kind of ensure that you have the tool to enable decision making, choosing the trade-off between durability, availability, and performance, and choosing the right tier of services for you to optimize cost footprint on cloud. Optimizing network is another good area to kind of also understand the data transfer scenarios, managing data transfer cost, inter availability zone traffics, and how that impacts your cloud cost, using CloudFront or use Cloud Explorer to understand that cost. So these are the kind of micro things you can still just start doing without having that FinOps framework. I'll talk more about like optimizing cloud native environments. I mean, it becomes more and more essential. We use these, optimization techniques when we are moving to cloud native footprint. So auto scaling is one area where, we can look at optimizing our scaling posture through scheduled scaling or step or dynamic scaling by defining different types of scaling events at different threshold levels. You can create scaling policies or template support or optimizing through managed services. This is one of the very, very interesting area for cloud native workloads. Now, when it comes to cloud matrices, I mean, I'm yet to see that one matrix which talks about financial component in DORA, but I believe that, there are certain things which we can kind of start looking at, like bill trend rate or untagged spend rate, unallocated spend rate, non-production spend rate. And these things will enable you to understand how you can bring more architectural components which support your optimized financial posture on cloud. These are kind of pointers. You can start looking at it from micro level. If you're already in cloud, these are very, very good starting points. Even all the other cloud providers have similar kind of services. So I'm just taking reference from AWS here. I'll also kind of talk about some functional advancements which are happening and how it will impact you from your cloud cost posture perspective. So when we talk about super cloud or cross cloud, this challenge becomes more and more evident that controlling costs for cloud becomes extremely challenging, but at the same time it's an opportunity. I mean, you see interoperability, so you can actually adjust your cloud costs if, let's say, your workloads are interoperable, and you can kind of address that challenge through interoperability and move your workload to a less cost kind of a CSP provider. Using an event-driven approach also for reusability and flexibility and building that full stack operability also helps you kind of ensure that you have the right cloud cost posture. And combining progressive delivery with machine learning. I mean, this is a no-brainer. You have to go through that feedback loop, that the third way of DevOps. But for how long and when you could decommission, or you kind of do a cutover from like feature perspective, that is something which you can also enable. Now, there are other things which you can do, creating a self-service FinOps portal. And these are like things which you can do at like the next stages of your optimization. So if you think about, there are out-of-box solutions, solutions provided by CSPs like AWS cost usage reports, enterprise dashboards are there. You can integrate services on top of those kind of dashboards, and you can get a clearer view on how you are spending your dollars on which kind of workload. There's another area which is very, very interesting and growing, is forecast spending using ML insights. Like for AWS, we use AWS forecast, that is a time series forecast that integrates your like cost usage report schema, and then you can train your machine learning models on your data set to predict your spending and forecasting your spend for, let's say, next 5 years, and so on and so forth. Cost optimization, you can also integrate services like AWS Trusted Advisor, which is integrating best practices for FinOps and can be integrated with other services. So, I mean, these are kind of micro initiatives you can still start to look at. We have covered a lot of things here, and I started with like the definition of FinOps, how we can move beyond only financial posture, what kind of, correlation it has with operating model, and then getting down to the practicalities of things, like what can be your first steps in the FinOps journey. My final words would say it all, like FinOps is a lever to discover the full value of cloud. And cloud is not a cost efficiency initiative. It's an innovation initiative. So start to take the first steps to make the fundamental change to the operating model, giving the developers direct access to CSP services and promoting innovation. Probably that's something which you could see as one of the last steps in the process, but to ensure that we take into account the journey with the maturity of the organization, and also build some kind of matrices through which we can measure our financial posture as well as our innovation posture with FinOps. That's how I think it will make more sense. With that, I will close today's session. I have used a reference book, AWS FinOps Simplified, for this session. We also have 2 sessions on this, which were done at DevOps Summit 2022, Kubernetes Cost Management with Goldilocks Open Source with Andy Sutherman. And we also had Chris Taub from LEIT, who talked about FinOps with DataOps. So I do recommend to check out these 2 sessions. I have put the links in this slide for this session. I also dropped down the links in the comment box. So I have some more recommendations of books if you're interested in DevOps and everything what is happening in 2023 with DevOps. There's a plethora of books which are kind of published by Pact. I would highly recommend to check out the Kubernetes Bible, 50 Kubernetes concepts every DevOps engineer should know, Kubernetes Certified Kubernetes Administrator Guide, which takes you to a certification journey, and Rancher Deep Dive. So if you happen to be at one of our face-to-face meetup, you can also get a chance to win any of these books as well. But for now, I think I will sign off. I probably will do another round of, talk on FinOps, just to bring more detailed aspects of, the framework, the operating model, and how to take that journey in a large or medium enterprise. So stay tuned for that. But for now, I sign off from here. Thank you very much for listening today.